Tonight on Canton Confidential.
So that is the driver's side of the vehicle.
Video evidence called into question.
Not once did you mention that this video is actually completely inverted.
Did not know.
The defense takes us back to the early days of the investigation.
It was your belief that Mr. O'Keefe had been struck in the face by a person.
My initial understanding was that the defendant stated that she hit him.
Including dramatic courtroom audio. From Karen Reed in the beginning stages of the investigation. Canton Confidential starts right now.
A shortened day in court, but no shortage of things to talking about. We have a lot to discuss. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Glenn Jones.
I'm J.C. Monahan. Today, Massachusetts State Police Sergeant Yuri Buchanan was called back to the stand. Sergeant Buchanan was the on-duty supervisor on January 29th of 2022, the day Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found in the front yard of a Canton home. Today, he was questioned about his investigation and the early days of the case.
That testimony included this video, which we showed you last night. It's surveillance footage from inside the Sally Port at the Canton Police Department, where Reed's SUV was stored after the incident. Our producers flagged a specific detail that the defense also noticed because the sergeant was asked about it today. It was the apparent inversion of the video, like looking at everything in a mirror, presented the first time without explanation. We'll break down that line of questioning a little later in our show.
Before we hear about reaction inside the courtroom, our John Maroney shows us highlights from today's testimony.
Trooper Proctor, you were notified.
I am not Trooper Proctor.
Michael Proctor's name came up a lot during the cross-examination of State Police Sergeant Yuri Buchanan. The defense claims Proctor and others altered evidence to frame Karen Reed, suggesting in court he even manipulated key items like clothing John O'Keefe was wearing when he died.
And those would have been certainly accessible to and in the possession of the lead case officer in the case. It was Trooper Proctor, right?
Yes, if Trooper Proctor needed to review those items, he would have access to those items.
Buchanan is Proctor's supervisor, and the jury was again shown video of them at the Canton PD with Reed's SUV. Buchanan says neither one of them touched the vehicle. The defense has a different take, saying the taillight was manipulated along with the video, which defense attorney Alan Jackson pointed out is inverted.
But the timestamp across the bottom is not inverted, which means somebody had to put that on the inverted, the manipulated, the altered video on purpose.
The defense says Reed damaged her taillight backing out of O'Keefe's driveway, not hitting him with her SUV as the prosecution charges. The defense showed the jury what it says is Reed's SUV hitting O'Keefe's parked car, shaking the tire.
Did you see the jurors' reaction today when they saw that wheel move? That's not a small thing.
The prosecution presented new crime scene pictures, including taillight pieces and a cap belonging to John O'Keefe. It also played an audio statement they say Reed made to police.
We're all in on the same joke, right? My taillight was cracked and John was pulverized.
Testimony is over for the week. The judge says the jury can expect to get the case the last week of June. In Dedham, John Maroney, NBC 10 Boston.
Well, clearly we have some details to unpack here. So we have Sue O'Connell, our courtroom insider, with us. Let's start with that inverted video. We talked about it at the end of our show last night.
Yep.
And you talked about the reaction to it. Can you just go back a little bit and do that again and what our producers noticed yesterday?
Sure. So the prosecution showed this video, the original video, to the court yesterday. And then, you know, there was some reaction and hubbub at the defense desk. Then there was a sidebar, and they were almost giddy at the defense desk about this. And Karen Reed actually turned around and mouthed, and you don't need to be a mouth reader or a
lip reader.
Thank you to understand her to say they have the wrong side. It's the wrong side. And so they had the sidebar, and then our team here took a closer look at what the video showed. And one of the first things they noticed is that the word police on that antique car and then the number 4 on the garage door are reversed. Here's what it's supposed to look like. That picture is what the actual evidence of the car is. So the question becomes, why was it inverted? Why wasn't the jury told it was inverted? And what's the point of it, of this mirror image, which I guess is a term of art that we heard a lot today?
That's good questions to be asking.
Yep.
Sergeant Buchanan was asked about this during cross-examination today. Let's listen to what he said.
from this perspective, from the perspective that the jurors are looking at,
Okay.
from all indications, that would appear to be the right side of the truck, the passenger side of the truck, and that taillight that you can see is the right rear taillight from this perspective, correct?
The way it presents itself, yes.
And yesterday, during the entirety of your questioning by Mr. Lally, not once did you mention that this video is actually completely inverted, correct?
Not, no.
Mr. Lally didn't ask you if it was inverted, correct?
That's correct.
And if I hadn't gotten up here and begun questioning you, that would be left uncorrected, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
So Buchanan ultimately says there that when he received that video from Canton PD, it was already showing that mirrored image. So how did people in the courtroom react to that?
Well, you know, Glenn, that look you get on your face when you feel like you're having the wool pulled over your eyes and you kind of look at each other like,
Yeah.
what, you know, what
gives?
WTF. All right, and there were 4 jurors who did that I saw just look at each other and go, what are we seeing here? What's happening here? It was confusing. And again, why, my theme to this entire trial is why.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of doing that? Or is it just such a big mistake? Or you didn't think that it would? I mean, if we did that in this business, if we showed a video and we altered it and we didn't tell the viewers, we'd get in trouble for that.
Right. No explanation.
We
was
also
given.
know looking in the mirror is not exactly the same as having someone look at you, because we look in the mirror a lot because we have to put our makeup on and we don't look the same on
We're
TV.
very vain.
So, I mean, there's real issues here.
But Assistant District Attorney Lally, do you think he knew it was inverted? Because that's kind of where we're at right now, right? Was that on the defense, Jackson is going at, how did this happen?
So what would
timestamp is normal?
Yeah. How would it have been different if during the prosecution present he would say, "What do you see here?" and the witness said, "Well, it's mirrored because sometimes that happens. It's accurate, an accurate representation of what happened, but it's reversed." How much would there be there for the defense to kick up?
Right.
Alan Jackson said outside when he was asked about this that he thinks that the prosecution was on social media last night, saw the reaction. I said, well, maybe you also saw our show. I threw that in there. And that's why they went at it this way, that suddenly the witness had some answers, this mirrored conversation, as if it's not really that impacted.
But maybe the damage already done from a credibility standpoint.
Yeah, there was some head shaking.
There was that one comment, I'll just end with this, where it was in real life or in the video?
Right. When the witness,
that was actually said on the stand.
Yeah, when the witness is asking the prosecutor, the prosecution witness is talking about prosecution evidence and saying, are you talking about in real life or what we just submitted to the court as evidence? It was a wince.
Okay. Sue O'Connell, thank you. Ahead on Canton Confidential, we're learning more about Karen Reed's possible state of mind following the death of her boyfriend, John O'Keefe.
When we come back, we break down the new video presented by the prosecution in court today.
So you're aware he was beaten up by Brian and calling out we're all in on the same joke, right? My taillight was cracked and John was pulverized.
That was audio of Karen Reed played for the jury today, and it was presented by the prosecution. Here to talk about it is local attorney and prolific TikToker, Catherine Loftus. All right, Catherine, now how do you think the audio supported the Commonwealth's argument in this case?
I'm not sure that it really supported anything to the Commonwealth's argument. I have always thought that audio didn't really help or hurt either side. It really seems, I think what the Commonwealth is trying to do is slowly present her statements, because Sergeant Buchanan spoke yesterday about her initial statements when they interviewed her, and that she asserted that she didn't remember, that her vehicle was cracked the night before. And so they're trying to contrast that slowly as time went on, her story began to change. Because I think moving forward, we haven't seen it in evidence yet, but I expect that there will be more statements from her Nightline interview, potentially text messages, cell phone recordings, anything like that. But overall, I think it really supports the defense theory more than the Commonwealth's theory. There's not, if there was a little bit of information in there that leaned one way towards the Commonwealth, I would see the benefit, but I'm not sure there was even really a benefit in playing it.
Well, that's why we were asking.
And it happens too often that way, it seems.
This week, the prosecution, at least yesterday, early today, talked about the alcohol that was consumed. Because in the beginning of the trial, it was, they've been drinking. But we put this together. It shows the video. We've added just the times and the number of drinks to the video based on Sergeant Buchanan's testimony. So, Catherine, we're 6 weeks in. Here we go. Drink 2. The time is 9:15. You can go along with this. We're just seeing this now. Can you explain why? Because this is the first time, from my perspective, that we are getting a clear layout of that night.
Well, I do think what the Commonwealth has been trying to do is present really two different cases. That because the defense theory is so pointed towards the third-party culprit, I think the Commonwealth made a strategic decision first to attempt to rebut the defense's theory and really put on what they thought of as maybe their more problematic witnesses or ones that they might have more questioning from the defense, and then transition to the strength of their case, which they perceive to be her statements that day when she speaks to troopers, her evolving statements, the level of intoxication that it appears she was on. I mean, that's a lot of alcohol in a short amount of time, and at one bar, and then they go to another bar. So I think what they're trying to do essentially is now sort of pivot to what they believe is the strength of their evidence, and part of that is her level of intoxication.
Let's talk a little bit about the police investigation, because we learned through testimony today that the Canton Police Department did recuse itself from interviews, at least in this case. But then we found out that the police chief in Canton came across some evidence at 34 Fairview after the incident took place. So the defense raises what I think is a good point. If you would recuse yourself from interviewing people, why wouldn't you also recuse your officers from visiting the crime scene and identifying evidence? What did you make of that argument?
So from my perspective, the way the testimony has come out is that, and it's obviously not from Chief Berkowitz directly, but that he essentially states that he was driving by and saw it. And now, if he drove by and saw it, and because the department was recused, he doesn't tell anybody, I would find that to be more problematic. We also heard from Sergeant Buchanan that he stated he advised, or instructed, I would say, his troopers to periodically go by, because as the weather was changing, as it was getting warmer and the snow was melting, to drive by to see if anything essentially appeared as the snow started to melt. So I don't actually, it's interesting, without hearing from Chief Berkowitz directly, we don't know how he was driving, how slow he was driving. Was he looking, or did he just see it out of the corner of his eye?
But is it even appropriate, if you've recused yourself, to say, but you know what, guys, if you drive by the street every once in a while and see if you see anything?
So that was Sergeant Buchanan. So that's the state police who instructed the troopers to do that. So I think that's fine.
I see.
What I see is Berkowitz, he's essentially driving by. As long as he doesn't pick up the evidence, collect the evidence, he calls in the troopers. I don't know that there's too much of an issue there.
Yeah, because he's Canton.
And we should point out that Buchanan says to him it was not suspicious that the chief did this.
Right, that's correct.
All right, Catherine, you're not going anywhere, thankfully. After the break, she'll be joined by our courtroom insider, Sue O'Connell, right here at the table.
We'll be talking about the early stages of the investigation and theories regarding what may have happened to John O'Keefe. You're watching Canton Confidential. We'll be right back.
We welcome Sue back to the table. Sue, you are in court today for a moment that I would think is going to be one of those key moments that developed. So we're going to play a clip, and we'll have Sue comment on the other side.
Did you say that there's a possibility that D was struck in the face with a cocktail glass?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you ever contact anybody at any medical facility and indicate that the investigation was being treated as a suspicious, in quotation marks, because the victim appeared to have been struck in the face by a cocktail glass?
Objection.
Allow that. Did you ever say that?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, I did say that to the medical examiner's operations desk.
Okay.
So this isn't the first time that another theory of what happened has been presented. Mm-hmm. How did it play to you when you heard it?
Well, I think, again, the jury now is skeptical. And I'm just looking at their faces and thinking how the faces that I make, like that face. And so the question sort of there is, he also said something about maybe it was a domestic, right? So had they already come to a conclusion that it was a car, and overrode their initial idea that he might have been in some physical altercation that didn't involve a car, that might have involved the glass, might have involved fists, might have involved, Karen in a domestic dispute with him, hitting him with a glass. So there's just this sort of questioning as to, well, if you thought that initially, and Lank from the Canton Police Department also has testified that earlier, did you pursue that to the degree that you, in the words of Yannetti and also this witness, exhausted the line of thinking there? And I think that's another skepticism that you can see on the jury's face when this testimony is happening.
All right, when we talk about this witness who we've seen for a day and a half now, Sergeant Buchanan, what do you think about his, capabilities as a witness, but also his need to have to always sort of explain work done by his subordinate, Michael Proctor, who we haven't heard from, and I'm not sure when we will?
We have not heard from Trooper Michael Proctor, and that's the big question on everybody's mind, is when is he going to testify, and if he's going to testify. I believe that he will testify. I think that it will be too much of a risk for the Commonwealth not to call him, since we've heard about his name almost incessantly at this point.
I think he was mistaken for him by Alan Jackson today. He called him.
Right.
But can you expand on that a little bit? So you're saying if he's a ghost to the jury, that's more of a risk than if you actually bring him up, even though he might be a liability.
Well, I think that it just leaves this open-ended question in the jury's mind, and you don't want to leave the jury with questions, even if it's not as helpful as it could be if it was another witness. You
so
want
a bad
to wrap
answer is
up.
better than no answer at all.
Sometimes it can be, and I think Buchanan. I think he's a good witness. I think he did a good job. I think he appears very reliable, at least to me. I don't know about how the jury or the people watching him. And it is interesting that the Commonwealth is essentially using him. It seems like a lot of what was done by Michael Proctor was also while Sergeant Buchanan was there. So they're really trying to get out as much testimony through Sergeant Buchanan. So I think that when they do call Michael Proctor, they can limit the amount of time that he's on the stand and what they ask him, but they can still get the evidence in through another trooper.
He was a good witness. I mean, he was a good witness for the prosecution. The jury, was listening to him and paying attention to him. He was not evasive. He answered questions in the same way to the defense that he did to the prosecution. He was human. He didn't want to get caught up in a trap, basically. He said, I want to answer this to Jackson, but I don't want you to come back at me. So, and he was thorough. And a couple of times he laughed when he realized it's like, I'm not, not only was he called Proctor, but he was supposed to recognize Proctor's handwriting, which he couldn't do. And he was just like, it's not me. And I'm inferring that there was some distance he also wanted to put between himself and Proctor, and also presenting yesterday that this was a team effort. Right? He said that a number of times.
All right.
Catherine, Sue?
Stay right there.
Still ahead, we are answering your question specifically about John O'Keefe's clothing.
The outfit he was wearing when he was found in the snow were displayed in court this week, but where was his hat? We want to answer that question next.
We get so many great questions from all of you. JC and I read them all. Before we go tonight, we want to answer one of the questions we've received from several of our viewers about the clothes John O'Keefe was wearing.
We have seen his shirt, his sweatshirt, his pants, but here's a question about the hat. Deb R. says they're showing all of his clothing and no mention of his baseball hat he was wearing at the bar. He had injuries to his head. Where is his hat? And today, Glenn, we basically got our answer.
We did get an answer. This is one of the evidence photos presented in court today. It's of John O'Keefe's hat flattened in the snow. It is difficult to see, but there it is. Sergeant Buchanan testified to finding the hat on February 3rd, several days after O'Keefe was found in that same area of the yard. But there is an explanation to why it may have taken so long to find. According to Buchanan, he, Trooper Proctor, and another trooper had returned to 34 Fairview to look for more evidence once the snow had started to melt.
Well, just a reminder, there's no court tomorrow, but we will still be here for you. We plan to answer more of your questions.
If you have something to ask one of our experts, send us an email at canton.confidential@nbcuni.com.
You can also head to our website to see which questions we've already answered. They have been compiled in one place, along with our additional coverage of the Karen Read trial. And to check it out, just head to NBC10boston.com and click on the Karen Read tab at the top.
We won't see you tomorrow, but I'll try to hold down the fort.
Thank you. I know you will.
Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you right back here tomorrow at 7. I'm Glenn Jones.
I'm JC Monahan. Have a great night.